Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
To all who shall see these presents, greetings. On behalf of Marine Corps University, the Marine Corps University Foundation, and the Krulak Center for Innovation and Future Warfare, welcome back to the Broadcast. Our series is designed to connect the world to the warfighter and PME with the best in innovative and creative thought. I'm your host, Major Nate Janikin, Operations Officer at the Krulak Center. Before we begin, please remember that all opinions expressed here are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Krulak Center, Marine Corps University, United States Marine Corps, or any other agency of the U.S. government. We will also be recording this webcast for the benefit of those in our community of interest who could not join us today, so we ask that you keep your own webcams off to help us stream smoothly. At the conclusion of our discussion, we'll have a question and answer session, so if you have a question, just type it into the group chat and we'll go through them in the order received. Today's actual host will be the Krulak Center's own Russia SME, Dr. Victoria Clement. Dr. Clement, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Major. So this will be the first in a series of podcasts that we're going to do, broadcasts that we'll be doing on Russia. Today's broadcast is entitled Chechnya's Troubles with Putin's Russia with Dr. Marat Iliyasov. I'd like to introduce Dr. Marat Iliyasov. He is a Chechen scholar specializing in matters related to Russia and the Caucasus. His research also encompasses questions related to authoritarianism and radicalization, as well as the dynamics of peace and wars in the North and South Caucasus. He analyzes these and other topics in a broader context of Eurasian politics and society. Dr. Iliyasov is currently involved in researching migrants from the Caucasus residing in the West. He holds the position of visiting scholar at the Global Academy of George Washington University, and prior to that, he served as professor of Russian politics at Miami University. Before commencing his academic career, Dr. Iliyasov worked in the non-governmental sector, promoting civil society, peace, and democracy in the Caucasus. And the impact of that research is notably evident through his frequent interaction with popular media resources. So it's my great pleasure, Dr. Iliyasov, to welcome you today to the broadcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting and having me today.
Yes, we're happy to have you.
Kind introduction. Yeah.
So in your work, you focus in part on Chechnya, Chechen history and politics. And today's Chechens live in the Republic of Chechnya, which is in the Russian Federation. The Chechens are a Muslim people, non-Russian ethnic group who have a distinct culture and history. The Chechens fought two wars with Russia, 1994 to 1996, and then again 1999 to 2009. And Chechnya has some administrative autonomy, but is run by a repressive, Moscow-backed or Kremlin-backed government led by Ramzan Kadyrov. Would you say that's accurate, an accurate assessment?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And that in a few words, that sums up everything what people can know about Chechnya today.
Yeah, so that's a good context for us to start. My first question is about the writing that you've done. You've written that Chechnya has been a major force shaping Russian domestic politics and its relations with the West since the fall of the USSR in 1991. So can you explain what you were referring to when you wrote about this and just tell us a little bit of the importance of Chechnya?
Yeah, that's right. So maybe not everyone sees Chechnya as of such importance, but if one starts analyzing the processes that were going on in Russia after the collapse of Soviet Union, one can definitely see that the major driver of many changes that happened in the Russian Federation was Chechnya, or they happened because of Chechnya. So we can start with a little bit of overview what was going on back then, and if people remember, so the collapse of the Soviet Union kind of announced the end of ideology of communism in this part of the world. So it was not in demand anymore. People did not believe in it, and and that created a gap, and people were in search of the national identity, not only Russian Federation, but other states that that were in the place of the former Soviet Union. So today we know them as the former Soviet Union place of states, or states of Central Asia, states of Baltic states, states of the Caucasus, Ukraine, Belarus. So all the states, not all of them knew what to do with this independence that happened quite suddenly, that happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they were choosing different ways to go. And not all of them were very straight ways. So some countries were on the more democratic side, let's say, as Baltic states, and other more on authoritarian side. Not all the countries wanted independence or wanted the collapse of the Soviet Union. For some of them, it was more as a stressful event rather than something that they would cheer. And in this range of options, Russian Federation was vacillating a lot in between which way to go, either democratic way or authoritarian. And we need to remember that at the same time, there was still a political struggle in between the first Russian president, Boris Yeltsin, and the first and the last Soviet president, Mikhail Gorbachev. And Boris Yeltsin, he was standing on democratic platform, and in order to mobilize support for his political stance, he was declaring such slogans as one can take as much of sovereignty was a buzzword at that time. One can take as much sovereignty as he can swallow. Mm-hmm. And that was the declaration when he visited Bashkiria.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, 1991, I think, maybe 1990. And Chechens took it literally. Oh, we want independence. And the president of Russia supports it. And it appeared that he didn't mean this. And it appeared a little bit later. So with these developments, Russia started trying to return Chechnya back into the Russian Federation, and Chechens didn't want to go back. And that was already kind of shaping politics. Once again, Russia was quite loose at that point, and it didn't have even constitution up until 1993. And it didn't know what to do, either to go and support this slogan that Yeltsin uttered. I don't know what happened, what encouraged him to do so, but or to go back. And in between this vacillation, they decided to go back, and Chechnya was the reason why they started moving back towards authoritarianism, backsliding. So the war, as when it started in 1994, was the clear sign that that Russia is going back into the authoritarianism. However, the world didn't see it as such at that point. So Chechnya shaped the inside Russian politics of authoritarianism, and at the same time, Russia managed to keep the world thinking that it is still a democratic country. So these are two developments in domestic and foreign politics of Russia. So Russia managed to convince the world that it is still a democratizing country, and the world believing in it or wanted to believe in it financed Russia at that time. There were a lot of credits given from the West. I think International Monetary Fund or World Bank credited Russia at that time. So pretty much financing the war in Chechnya. So the world was quite blind in terms of assessing the war crimes, the war as such. What it cared about, the West and the world, was non-proliferation, so of nuclear weapons. So at that time, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it was one of the biggest problems and headaches to the West. What to do with 15 more nuclear states, right? And once this problem was solved and all the republics that had nukes on their territory gave them back to the Russian Federation, this problem was solved. And suddenly, if Russia collapses with Chechnya going out and others following, which wouldn't be the case, but Russia presented it as it could, that would be another headache for the West, which they didn't want. So therefore, the war was kind of justified in the eyes of the Western countries.
So let me just ask you, when did the Chechens first ask for or demand independence from Russia? 1990, 91, 92?
So the process, like everywhere where the nationalism was quite strong, like Baltic states, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Chechnya, in these countries, the process started together with perestroika, glasnost. So nationalism was growing at that time. It was coming out, and it started in some cases, as in Chechnya, as a quite innocent green movement against the new chemical plant that the authorities wanted to build near one of the cities in Chechnya. So it was against this plant. And then it started growing, and grew into Chechen Vainakh, actually at that time called Vainakh, in Chechen language means our people. So it includes Chechens and English. So Vainakh Democratic Party, and then the Congress of the all people in Chechnya. And that's pretty much during this Congress that included a lot of delegates from all parts of Chechnya and Ingushetia. That's when the idea of independence was voiced for the first time. So it was 1990. Yeah.
But the Chechens have kind of a special history and special relationship with Russia, don't they? I mean, they were part of the Russian Empire. And during, I just want to take you back a little bit in history, just to have you talk a little bit about the earlier years. In 1944, the Chechens had a trouble with the Stalinist regime. They were labeled untrustworthy people. And I wonder if you can tell us what happened to them and how that shapes the society today.
Right. So yeah, Chechnya has a long record of fighting against the state. So once the state, and the state, by the state I mean Russia, was Russian Empire first, then it was Soviet Union, and then Russian Federation. So once the state took over, it banned some practices, it removed some practices, and Chechens, they were not happy with this kind of colonization, and they fought back. And it was quite a hard integration process, if you want. And eventually, as a final solution or whatever, I'm not sure what was the reasoning that Stalin had, but the practice of deporting people was from 1920s, I think. So Stalin was already in charge, and he started practicing this as a mean of suppressing nationalism, suppressing pro-independence movement. So there were several waves of deporting people. Baltic states experienced that, so they were part of population. But the entire nation, and of such a big scale, Chechens are the biggest nation in the North Caucasus, and to organize the deportation of almost 500,000 people that was a huge military operation. And keep in mind that it was during the Second World War when Russia had really big troubles on the front lines, 1944. So the idea was to break Chechen spirit, I guess, so they wouldn't ever rise against the Soviet Union or Russia or whatever. And so entire population was detained. They were put into the trains and shipped out. And during this shipment, which was in the crowded rail cars with no absolutely minimal comfort or whatever, so epidemic diseases happened. So many people died on the road. And once they arrived to Central Asia, they were dropped in the middle of nowhere as well in many cases. Not all the time probably, but in many cases. So the memories that people collected in Chechnya about that, they were horrible. It was horrible events. So people with no food, no water, no shelter, and it is the end of February. It's or beginning of March, and it is super cold there. So people are dying like in mass, and this was a huge trauma. But to my mind, the bigger trauma was that the Chechens lost their home, so they didn't have homeland anymore, and that was probably more psychological trauma rather than trauma of loss of almost half of the population. And this trauma actually shaped all other relationship, attitude towards Soviet, towards Russia, towards politics, and that was a really big. It had really big impact on Chechen decision to declare independence. I remember myself when in 1990s, like early 1990 or 1991, the memories of deportation, they were all around. People were talking always about them, that it shouldn't be repeated. We should get our independence because we don't want the repetition of this traumatic experience. And the only thing that can prevent it, because Russia is such a big country and we cannot deal with it, the only thing that can prevent it is international law. What a naive view from the perspective of today, but that was the view of early 90s, that if Chechnya gets independence, if the independence is recognized, then international law can prevent Russia from doing such injustices again to the
So
nation.
if half or most of the Chechen people were moved out, and they were moved on trains to Central Asia, they were deported. All the people.
All people, yeah.
All of the Chechens. Yeah. How do they get back to Chechnya? How do we have a Chechnya today?
So it was Stalinist policy, and as you know, once Stalin died, the next leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, he initiated de-Stalinization. And as a part of de-Stalinization, he allowed the deported people to return to their homeland. During the Stalinist era, the entire population of North Caucasians, as well, Karachay and Balkars, were deported as well. They are smaller people than Chechnya, and it didn't require such coordinated military operation as for the Chechens. They were much smaller people. Chechens and Gush were deported. Before them, Koreans were deported, removed from one part of the Soviet Union to the Central Asia. Volga Germans were deported. Lithuanians were deported. So there were a lot of Greeks were deported. Meskhetian Turks from Georgia were deported. So it was a lot of moving and most of these people were sent to Central Asia, and many of them died depending on the time of the year. Crimean Tatars as well, I forgot to mention. So depending on the time of the year when they were deported, people had either bigger chances to survive or smaller chances to survive. Chechens were deported in the late winter, early spring, and there was no possibility to forage at that time. There was people, the future hosts, they were instructed not to help these people. They were instructed that someone like worse than criminals are coming. So the attitude was relevant, so they would Central Asian people, Kyrgyz, Kazakhs, they saw Chechens as worse than criminals. And in accordance to this view, they didn't, in many cases, didn't help. In many cases, they did help also to survive, but in many cases, they did not. So it all played the role.
But
yeah.
so is the word rehabilitation used to describe the experience of returning home, or is there a
not
good way
really.
to describe that? No.
So in 1957, when it happened, it was not rehabilitation. It was restoration of the republic, but Chechens were still labeled as enemies of the state. And that continued up until 1990. So only in 1990, 1991, that's when the rehabilitation word started being used, and people were recognized as repressed with no reasons. And those who lived during that time in Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, they were even receiving some money as a compensation. It was such a small money, as if it was I don't know, as if it was another humiliation, even to get this money from the state, as if this money could somehow compensate really such small money it was. All the sufferings that happened, yeah.
So this really, this trauma really shaped the memory of the Chechen people, and you said that it shaped their decision to try to secede from Russia. Let's talk about Chechnya today. It is a part of Russia. It's an administrative region within Russia, but as we said, it has some autonomy, and the leader is Ramzan Kadyrov. Why does he enjoy Kremlin support? Why is there now a positive relationship between the government of Russia, or the Kremlin, and the administration of Chechnya?
Right. So yeah, as you said, that this experience actually shaped the attitude of many Chechens toward Russian Federation, toward Russian state, and current ruler of Chechnya, I do not call him leader, because leadership means that person kind of inspires somebody to follow him, right? But
Right.
in this case, probably he inspires somebody, but it's not in mass, or so I do not give him this leader word. So he was also from the family that was deported, right? So he is supposed to have the similar sentiments toward Russia, but Kadyrov, he inherited this current ruler. He inherited this from his father, Ahmad Kadyrov, who was the founder of the regime, current regime, and this happened in 1999. So the second war in Chechnya, the first war Russians lost, and after 3 years there was a second invasion that you could see as revanchist and revisionist, whatever. So Russia wanted to a revenge, and And with the Second War, they applied a little bit different strategy and tactics, and one of them was making this war not in between Russian state and Chechen people or Russian state and Chechen state, but as a conflict within Chechnya. And to do so, they created administration and planted it there. This was quite often used strategy by Russia. So one can recall the Winter War with Finland. So before they attacked Finland, they also created an administration that's supposed to take over in Finland. It's only because they didn't manage to occupy the whole territory. This administration stayed in Russia. So, but in Chechnya, it was successful. And Kadyrov, Ahmad Kadyrov, father of the current ruler, he was successful in it. He was the head of this new administration. And so they started so-called Chechenization policy. So making the conflict internal rather than external. And Kadyrov, he is an ordinary guy from the rural side of the countryside, and he is not really educated. He has no kind of talents or anything. He was serving as his father's bodyguard. Like all the time. Then he promoted him to the head of his security because it grew in numbers. And actually, he was the head of security of his father when he was killed. So if somebody is to blame for the killing of his father, it's him, actually. Yeah. But anyway, once it happened, Ahmad Kadyrov was blown in the stadium. Explosion device detonated in the stadium during the victory parade on
the May 9th.
Yes, exactly. So they were came there to enjoy victory parade in the Grozny stadium, and the explosion happened. And Kadyrov, Ramzan Kadyrov, at that time, he was in Moscow, and what he was doing there and why he was not protecting his father is a question, right? But he was someone very quickly brought to the Kremlin. Maybe people remember his famous pictures when he is in a tracksuit in the Kremlin. People say that he was the only person who ever entered Kremlin in the tracksuit.
Very casual, yes.
Yeah, which makes him very famous.
Yeah.
In a way. So, so he was pretty much at that day he was appointed a new leader of Chechnya, even though it took him 2.5 years more to become actual because he was not of age, according to the constitution of Chechnya that was drafted by his father. So the earliest one person can be a candidate for the presidency in Chechnya, it was 30 years old, and Kadyrov was only 28 at that time. So they appointed somebody else, and Kadyrov waited for 2 years. But the thing is that he was the key figure who helped to suppress resistance. Kadyrov knew how it worked, even though he didn't fight on the side of the Chechen warriors. He was nearby there, and he knew how the system works. He knew where people hide, how they try to avoid, whenever it's possible, traps that Russians put all around. So he knew the system.
So he helped during the second Chechen-Russian war.
Exactly.
So he helped Russia.
He was the key figure that helped to Russia to win the second Chechen war because of his local knowledge, pretty much. And another thing why he enjoys that much support, as you mentioned, but no one actually of the Russian governors enjoyed that much of support of Putin, and this is because he is a Putin's project. So if Putin says that that Kadyrov is wrong, that he does something not correct, or whatever, it means that he recognizes his own mistake. And Putin is not a person who recognizes his own mistakes, even if he does mistakes. So that makes him kind of, in a way, invincible in this sense.
I see.
So yeah, that's why I see there is a kind of loyalty from Kadyrov's side, because he knows that he is dependent on Putin, that if something happens, Putin will have no doubts in eliminating him. It would be, he wouldn't have. So he, on every occasion, tries to emphasize his loyalty. And at the same time, Putin knows that he is loyal, and he knows that he needs him to make sure that everyone sees that he was correct.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned his role in the Second War. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about the war, and especially, I'm wondering, what lessons did Russia learn in the war with Chechnya that it might be applying to the situation in Ukraine today?
Yeah. Well, the experience of war as such is very much teaching, I believe, and Chechnya was probably the first open war of the Russian Federation that it waged after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So it was a lot of mistakes done, and Russia, of course, learned from it. I drafted a comparison of Chechen wars with war in Ukraine, was in Chechnya and war in Ukraine, with Professor Yoshiko Herrera not long ago. And in our comparison, we are trying to look at what political, military, and information strategies Russia used in both cases. And you could see that we compared 3 wars, so two wars in Chechnya and 1 war in Ukraine. So in all these 3 cases, Russia used pretty much the same political strategies. It tried to create this new government, to appoint, to use it as an actual government, delegitimizing the government that was elected. In military campaign, it uses strategy of first, like, blitzkrieg, trying to take over the territory and establish this new government that they just created. And if it didn't work, and it didn't work in none of these cases, they turned to the strategies of terrorizing, of terror, of frightening people, and that includes war crimes like massacres. So it happened in Chechnya on many cases, like long after the war, Chechens would discover the mass graves of people who were killed and buried. They tried to conceal their crimes, and some of them they were not able to conceal, and so the small town of Samashki, where I'm from, was one of that examples. So they killed a lot of innocent people there, just civil population. Same massacre, same type of massacre happened in Bucha in 2022. And then none of these strategies works, and Russia turned into the war of attrition. Of course, Russia is incomparable with Chechnya, and of course the resources are very different. Even with Ukraine, if Ukraine wouldn't have received help of the West, it would have been probably already surrendered. I don't know. With Chechnya, it took 10 years because of the stubbornness of the Chechens who didn't want to recognize the defeat. And we actually did do it without any international help. So the main supplier of the weapons and everything was Russia at that time. I'm not joking. It was possible to buy everything from the Russian military. So those who fought the war, they did it.
So,
Oh, I
so
didn't. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Just a second. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the main lesson I guess that Russia learned from this experience was the use of information strategy. So in Chechnya, they realized the first war they lost a lot of because they allowed international journalists to come to Chechnya and cover the war events from the Chechen side. And Chechen side was always welcoming them and showing them, oh, look, this is what Russians did, this is what Russians do. And this news would reach the audience in Russia and in the West. And support to the war was going down all the time. Whereas in Second War, Putin already was in power, and that was the lesson that he learned. Probably, I don't know. Maybe somebody advised him on that, but that was clear. They sealed the republic. There was no possibility for international journalists to enter Chechnya anymore, only for Russian lead tours. So all the information that was coming out of Chechnya was from Russian side, and it was all oriented to mobilize support. And the same you can see in Ukraine. They started preparing the Russian population to be supportive for war from 2013, probably 2012. If you look at what they were showing on TV, and TV is the main source of Russian information. People do not read anymore. So they just watch TV and they consume the information that is given by the government. And in Russia, since 2001, probably, or even 2000, the information is controlled by the government, like very strictly. Yeah, so there were very few independent sources of journalism, and today probably there are none.
Right. So one of the differences between the Chechen experience and the Ukrainian experience, as you pointed out, was that the Ukrainians have received international support, right? So the Chechens did not. Do you think that was because people viewed it as an internal situation, an internal Russian situation? And then I wonder, you mentioned the Chechenization policy. Is that related? Is that related to the information warfare that we saw Moscow engaging in at the time, that they painted this as a Chechen civil war, Islamic radicals, not people who are, ought to have independence?
Yeah, I think there are several factors that played a role. So first of all, yes, it was success, if you want, of Russian diplomacy that presented this war as a war against I'm talking about the second war in Chechnya, especially because that's the war that Russia won, right? So Chechnya is a part of Russian Federation. So the presenting this war as a counter-terrorist operation, which put it into the context right after 9/11, right? So the world was very much supportive of the Russian side. In between the war, not to idealize Chechens, there were crimes in Chechen Republic, and some of them were crimes that involved international people. So some international workers died in Chechnya. Later on, it appeared that those who who were behind these killings, they were somehow related to Russian security services, but it didn't matter anymore. So the fact that the international community saw Chechnya as a place where criminal activity is taking place, so it was already kind of ruined the reputation and ruined the willingness to support. Then Chechnya is strategically not as important for the West as Ukraine. So Ukraine is a huge territory, a lot of industry, many people. There is a common view among academics and politicians that without Ukraine, Russia cannot be an empire. And so this is like the idea, okay, we cannot give away Ukraine to Russia, so it wouldn't become the empire. With Chechnya or without Chechnya, Russia, it doesn't change many things. So Chechnya, if you see geographically, territorially, it's 1,000 times smaller than Russian Federation, 1,000 times. And in terms of the population, it's 100 times smaller. Like, it might be not very precise with figures, but pretty much. So Chechnya was not as important to the West to support. The problem is that by allowing Chechnya to happen, the West allowed Ukraine to happen. So this is the main mistake that brought to the today's situation with Ukraine. So if the West, maybe not in terms of weaponry, maybe not in terms of whatever, but if Russia would understand back then that it cannot get away with war crimes, it cannot get away with attacking innocent people, it cannot get away with starting wars with no good reason. So if it would be made clear back then, today West wouldn't have to deal with problem of Ukraine.
That I see your reasoning there, and I understand the linkages that you're making. It makes sense. We have a question in the chat. It says, this is from Albert Lee, and he asks, Dr. Iliyasov, you have described Ramzan Kadyrov as being Putin's project. Do you have any ideas on how Kadyrov's children or anyone else among the Chechen people are being similarly cultivated as his eventual replacement?
This is an interesting question. It's quite relevant as well with all these rumors about Kadyrov's health and possible death coming soon. So yeah, the thing is that, of course, Kremlin thinks about how to replace Kadyrov and with whom. But this is independent thinking. And what we see today inside of Chechnya, there is some kind of reshuffling going on there. So the prime minister stepped down, the speaker of the parliament was replaced, then Kadyrov's son was moved from one position of a minister to the other. Another young guy was appointed to his position. So it's all going on, some kind of reshuffling. And since the rumors about Kadyrov's health started in like around a year ago, he was actively promoting his children into the positions of power. So I do not see it as possible for him to ensure that his children will succeed his power if he dies soon. It can be possible if he lasts a couple of years more, let's say, but if he dies soon, I don't think it would be possible. So Kadyrov thinking and Kadyrov idea to ensure that replacement happen, it doesn't mean that it goes along with what Kremlin think. So Kremlin might have its own project. And Novaya Gazeta published recently investigative journalism research on Kadyrov, proving that he is kind of dying almost tomorrow. And they say that Apti Alaudinov, who was part of Kadyrov team, and then he was sent away to Ukraine because he lost his trust. So he is kind of a main candidate. I don't think that he is the main candidate, but to my mind, it doesn't matter that much. I think that Kremlin can have, they have many candidates. There are many people who are the same brutal, the same uneducated, the same loyal, and the same willing to support Kremlin for the money as Kadyrov. So there are many of them in Chechnya. So I don't think Kremlin will have problems with the candidates, first of all. And of course, the one that they back up, he will win because the power is on the Russian side, military power. And the internal fight for the position might happen not involving Kadyrov children who are too young and too inexperienced and do not have that much of supporters actually. So internal fight can happen again in the case of sudden death of Kadyrov. So if it happens like this, so then maybe some of the top leadership who are around the Kadyrov could start this fight. And probably that's why we see this reshuffling in the government of Kadyrov, who tries to make sure that there is no such a fight. So he's kind of trying to pave the way for his children to be in a better position once the situation happens.
Well, let me ask you another question. This is also from Albert Lee. Along the same lines, you mentioned Ukraine again, and he asks, some of the descendants of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, which is the proper name of the republic, some of the leaders are or were fighting in Ukraine as volunteers on the Ukrainian side. What is your take on how this might influence the development of Chechen nationalism separate from Kadyrov? So is there still a, you said Kadyrov, you wouldn't call him a leader. Does he enjoy popular support? Or are these people who are fighting in Ukraine are very much against him? Do they represent the more popular view?
Yeah, so I will go back to where I started, that Kadyrov was the key figure of suppressing the resistance in Chechnya, right? So those who are not killed, those who were resisting Russian invasion, Russian troops defending their homeland, they moved out. Some tried to go to the Western countries to ask for the asylum and establish their life there. Some in the latest stages of the war, like 2014, pretty much, they moved to the Middle East. It was time when Russia started fighting in Syria as well. So the involvement of Russia in Syria became obvious, and Chechen fighters, they saw it as a possibility to fight Russia in this place. So that's why they moved there. There were also people who went to support Islamic State. There were people who went to other sides, but there were a bunch of those who were still with the idea of independent Chechen state, nationalists, let's call them. So they moved for this specific purpose, to fight Russia in a different place. And the same happened in Ukraine, pretty much in the same time. 2014, I think that's when annexation of Crimea, and next year it was already the eastern parts of Ukraine that were separatism was encouraged there, and that's when Chechens who moved to the west and who tried to kind of establish their life there, they still could not take that Russia won in this war. The war did not finish for them. So they created volunteer battalions that are still fighting in Ukraine today. So this was the first. So the idea is, okay, Russia is ultimate evil, and we need to fight it anyway. This is the mission of their life. So every person has some kind of mission of the life, and for these people, it was their mission. And then when in 2022, the full-scale invasion happened, that encouraged even more Chechens who were in the West to volunteer for the war in Ukraine. And Chechen politicians in exile, those who are still from the times of independent Chechnya, Ichkeria, who are still kind of associated with the first independent governments, Dudayev, Maskhadov, they of course try to instrumentalize the situation, to use it in order to create an opportunity for the future generations to have this independent state. So they try to ensure support of Ukraine, and Ukraine, of course, does it because it helps them with their fight as well. So it's kind of mutually beneficial in this sense. So so I don't know about the feelings, what they think or whatever. Of course, this is different. Even if there is an opportunity to interview some of these people, there is no 100% guarantee that they say tell the truth, right? So, but this is what it seems like. So many people who are volunteering for war in Ukraine, Chechens, they try to dissociate themselves from Chechen politicians. Actually, they try to show, yes, we are for independent Chechnya, but we are not fighting for you or for your government. So this is the situation.
That makes sense. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm wondering, I want to give you an opportunity to ask to say anything that you didn't get a chance to say yet. But I'm also wondering what it is you think we can learn about Russia or the way the world works by studying the Caucasus generally and Chechnya specifically.
I think the big lesson for the world could be the attitude that Russia and Russians possess. So toward the neighbors. So, and the Caucasus is quite exemplary because the conflict started pretty much there, where the Russian involvement was very obvious. So if we think about the Georgia, for example, that had two sources of instability. So Russia pretty much created these sources in order to prevent Georgia moving out of the orbit of influence. And that pattern you can see later in many different places, including Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So supporting of separatism in the eastern part of Ukraine, it reminds the supporting of Abkhazia or South Ossetia. And like, what happened if people still try to keep going their way? Then you see the war in Chechnya, right? And all the suffering, the suppression of the people, establishment of authoritarian government there. But the biggest probably lesson that the world could learn once again, that Russia denies sovereignty of these people. Mm-hmm. So for Russia, Ukraine is the same as Chechnya, pretty much. Chechnya was not a union-level republic in the Soviet Union. So it was on a lower level. So it kind of didn't have the right to have sovereignty, even though it tried and declared it following the Yeltsin's encouragement. But Ukraine, that was the union-level republic, and even during the Cold War, I think Soviet Union tried to make sure that Ukraine has a vote in the United Nations as a separate country. So this way, Soviet Union tried to make more votes for
itself.
It didn't happen, but that was the idea. Even then, Russia denies sovereignty of Ukraine. If you look at the rhetoric and this famous Putin's article of 2021, I think that explains
July 2021.
Right, that explains what Ukraine is. It's kind of no, there is no such a nation as Ukraine. That's what he says, and this attitude could be learned from the way that from the policies of the Russian Federation toward the Caucasus and Chechnya. If you look at the society, this is another thing that can be learned as well about Russia. So Russians in general also look at the people of different ethnic groups or ethnic minorities, if it is correct term. So they look at them as second-hand citizens, maybe even third-hand. So this is the attitude which probably feed each other. So politicians that deny sovereignty of the nations and people that look at these people as some kind of inferior. So this is another thing that the world can learn. And I think another important part that should not be forgotten as well, that Russian democratic movements or Russian liberals, they do not move far away from the official position actually in these terms as well. So I don't know if you recall Khodorkovsky, one of the leader of the opposition Russian, once he just finished his term in prison and was out of prison. In one of his first interviews, he was saying that he is ready to go and fight in Chechnya to make sure that it stays as a part of Russian Federation. This was also very exemplary, demonstrating where Russian liberalism actually is. So it's not much different from
Very nationalistic.
Very imperialistic.
Imperialistic. Okay.
So and the West is again kind of lulled by their democratic values or whatever, which are hidden, which are hiding actual intentions. So this is probably the most valuable lesson that the West could learn from the attitude of Russians and Russian politicians toward the Caucasus and Chechnya.
Okay, well, thank you so much for explaining all of that. It was, you did a great job, and you answered our questions in a way that brought us full circle, I think. So let me wrap up by saying thank you, Dr. Iliyasov, for being with us today. Thank you for your time and insight.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Appreciated having you.
We'd also like to thank everyone that joined us in the chat today. And with that, that'll bring our episode to the close. So go ahead and carry out the plan of the day.
Okay, thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Marat. This was wonderful.
Thanks for joining us. As always, we depend on support and feedback from the Team Krulak community to constantly improve our offerings and reach a wider audience. So if you have feedback on this episode, please take a moment to fill out the survey linked in the show notes to help us do better. Also, if you have enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, or leave us a review on the podcast app of your choice. It truly does help us reach a wider audience. Thank you as always for your support, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.